All right, let's jump into Isaiah chapters 25 through 27. This deep dive is going to be intense. Get ready for some seriously wild imagery and prophecy,
Mhm.
but we're not going to just skim the surface or anything. We're going to unpack some fascinating theological ideas and
Yeah.
connect them to your life.
Yeah.
These chapters are almost like a microcosm of the bigger story in Isaiah:
Yeah.
judgment, hope, and a glimpse of the future for both Israel and the whole world, really.
What's really striking to me is how these chapters use like these everyday images like banquets and farming, even monsters,
Yeah.
to explain these really complex theological concepts.
Okay, so let's just jump right into Isaiah 25. We start with a ruined city, which is uh, pretty intense imagery. It's God's judgment, right?
Right.
But it's not just some random vengeful act.
Right. It was probably directed at a specific enemy of Israel, like back then. But it speaks to a bigger truth about God's justice. It's not about punishment for its own sake, but about like setting things right in the world.
Interesting. So then we have this crazy shift in tone. We go from destruction to this incredible feast on a mountain. And it's not just for the Israelites, it's for everyone. So what's the significance of that?
Well, mountains in the Bible often represent a place where heaven and earth meet. So having a feast on a mountain suggests like a universal gathering, a time when God's blessings are available to all humanity.
Yeah, that image of a banquet is so rich with symbolism. We're talking aged wines, choice cuts of meat,
Yeah.
the good stuff. What does that say about God's nature?
Abundance. God's grace. It's like a picture of complete satisfaction, a world without any lack or need. It's not just physical either. It's a feast for the soul too.
And then in verse 8, we get this incredibly moving image of God swallowing up death for all time and wiping away everyone's tears. That really hits home, doesn't it? It speaks to something deep within us.
Absolutely. It taps into that universal human longing for a world without suffering, a world where death is defeated. How does that resonate with you personally? What are some of the things you long for in a world like that?
I
Mm.
I think for me, it's about the hope that even in the face of loss and grief,
Hmm.
there's ultimately something more, right? It's comforting to think about a future
Yeah.
where those things don't have the final say.
Yeah.
Okay, so we go from judgment and destruction to celebration and this incredible promise of hope. It's a lot to unpack in just one chapter. Let's move on to Isaiah 26, where the theme shifts to trust and peace.
Yeah, this chapter reads like a song of confidence in God, and it uses this interesting metaphor of a strong city. I wonder, what comes to mind when you hear that phrase? What are your strong cities, the things that give you a sense of security in life?
It uh, it makes me think about the things that we rely on for protection and stability. Maybe it's our job, our relationships, or even just our own inner strength. But the text seems to suggest that true peace comes from putting our trust in something bigger than ourselves, I guess.
Exactly. Isaiah's making the point that real peace doesn't come from like building walls around ourselves or
Yeah.
clinging to our own limited understanding. It comes from surrendering to God's protection and provision. He's the ultimate strong city.
That makes sense, especially in a world that often feels anything but peaceful. But it's not always easy to let go of control and put our trust in something we can't, see or fully understand, right?
Right.
So how do we cultivate that kind of deep trust in God?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it? And I think it's a process,
Yeah.
a journey of getting to know God more deeply through His Word, through prayer, and through the experiences of life. It's about learning to recognize His presence and His faithfulness, even in the midst of difficult circumstances.
It's about those aha moments where we see God working behind the scenes, even when we
Yeah.
um,
Eagle.
even when we didn't realize it.
Exactly. It's about looking back on our lives and seeing how He's been with us all along, guiding us, protecting us, and providing for us, even when we weren't aware of it.
There's also a fascinating contrast in Isaiah 26 between those who trust in God and those who don't. It says, "The wicked don't learn from God's judgments, but those who trust find peace and understanding." What do you make of that?
It's a sobering reminder that our response to God's actions matters, right? It highlights the difference between simply acknowledging God's power and genuinely surrendering to His will. True trust isn't just about feeling safe. It's about allowing God's wisdom to shape our choices and guide our steps.
Then we get to those intriguing verses 14 and 19 about the dead living and not living. It seems contradictory, doesn't it? How do we make sense of that in light of the Old Testament's understanding of of the afterlife.
It's definitely it's a head scratcher. The concept of resurrection was still developing in the Old Testament. It wasn't as clearly defined as it is in the New Testament. But I think these verses reflect different dimensions of the afterlife.
So what's Isaiah getting at here?
Well, the verse that says the dead will not live might refer to those who have been judged and permanently separated from God. You know, their existence has essentially lost its meaning and purpose. But the verse that speaks of your dead living again likely refers to the faithful remnant of Israel, those who have placed their trust in God. For them, death isn't the end; it's a transition to a renewed existence.
So it's like saying there are different
Mm.
different destinations after death depending on your relationship with God.
Exactly, and the imagery of verse 19 is so vivid. Corpses rising, people awakening from the dust and shouting for joy. It's a powerful picture of new life bursting forth, even in the face of death.
And then there's that beautiful comparison, for your dew is as the dew of the dawn.
Yeah.
What's the significance of that image?
Dew in the ancient Near East was a symbol of life-giving moisture, especially in those arid regions, right? So connecting it with the dawn emphasizes the idea of new beginnings, you know, a fresh start. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, God's power to renew and restore is always present.
It's almost like saying that even when things seem hopeless, there's always the possibility of new life, new growth, a new dawn.
Absolutely. And that sets the stage for the dramatic events we'll explore in Isaiah 27.
Okay, let's dive into that chapter. And wow, it starts off with a bang. God battling Leviathan, this terrifying sea monster. What's going on there?
Leviathans, a powerful symbol in ancient mythology, representing chaos and the forces that threaten to destroy creation. So God's battle against Leviathan symbolizes his ultimate victory over evil and his power to bring order out of chaos. What are some of the Leviathans you face in your own life? You know, those things that feel overwhelming or chaotic.
I think we all face those leviathans from time to time, right? Maybe it's a personal struggle, maybe it's a relationship issue, or even just the feeling of being overwhelmed by the demands of life. But it's a powerful reminder that we're not alone in those battles, and that God is ultimately in control.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even when things feel chaotic and out of control, God is still at work bringing order and purpose out of the chaos.
And it's not just about defeating evil; it's also about protecting and nurturing those who are faithful to Him. We see this in the shift from the Leviathan imagery
Yeah.
to the metaphor of the vineyard of beauty.
Exactly. It's like God is saying, okay, the chaos is dealt with. Now let's focus on nurturing and restoring my people. The vineyard represents Israel, God's chosen people, and he's depicted as uh, a diligent gardener, carefully tending to his precious vines. What do you think about that imagery? Does it resonate with you in any way?
For me, it evokes a sense of peace and security, knowing that God is actively involved in our lives, protecting us and providing for our needs. It's a very comforting image.
I agree. It speaks to God's personal care for each of us. He's not some distant deity who's uninvolved in our lives. He's intimately involved, tending to us with love and care, just as a gardener tends to their vineyard.
It's also interesting how the vineyard imagery connects to the theme of fruitfulness. We see this in the image of Jacob taking root and filling the world with fruit. It's a pretty bold statement about the future of Israel.
It points to a time of extraordinary blessing and growth, not just for Israel, but for all who are grafted into God's family through faith. It's not just about material prosperity, though. It's about spiritual growth and the impact our lives have on others. You know, it's like saying that our faithfulness will have a ripple effect, spreading God's blessings throughout the world.
That's a powerful thought. So it's not just about our own personal relationship with God. It's about how that relationship transforms us and empowers us to make a difference in the world around us.
Absolutely. And that connects to a key question we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive. How do we become those fruitful branches, bearing the fruit of God's Spirit in our lives and in the world?
That's a great question to ponder, and it's something we'll delve into more deeply in our next session. But for now, we'll leave you with this thought. How do these images of judgment, hope, and restoration speak to your own life and experiences? What resonates with you the most? And what challenges or encouragements do you find in these ancient words?
We encourage you to take some time to reflect on what we've discussed today and see how these truths from Isaiah might apply to your own life.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Isaiah 25 through 27. Last time, we left off with that image of Jacob taking root and filling the world with fruit. This idea of God's people being a source of blessing and abundance. But before we get too far into that, I
Yeah.
wanted to circle back something from Isaiah 25 that's been on my mind.
Oh, what's that?
It's that section about Moab. It seems so out of place, almost jarring. We're talking about this amazing banquet for all nations. And then suddenly, Moab is singled out for judgment. It feels kind of harsh.
That's a great observation, yeah. It does seem abrupt, but I think it speaks to a really important point. Remember, Moab was a nation that often caused trouble for Israel. They were seen as rivals and even enemies at times.
So it's just like a reminder that even though God desires blessing for everyone, there are still consequences for those who choose to reject him and oppose his people.
Right. And I think it's also important to remember that God's judgment isn't arbitrary or vengeful. It's about setting things right, bringing order out of chaos.
So even in judgment, there's a sense of purpose, a desire for restoration.
Exactly. And that's why repentance is such a crucial theme throughout the Bible. God doesn't delight in punishing people. He longs for them to turn away from their destructive paths and embrace his forgiveness.
It's like he's always holding out a hand of reconciliation, even to those who have been his enemies.
Precisely. And that brings us back to that image of the banquet. It's a symbol of God's extravagant welcome, his desire to gather all people to himself.
Yeah. I love that image of tearing down the walls that divide us and feasting together at God's table. But that makes me think of something else from Isaiah 25, the covering and the veil that God destroys. What does that symbolize?
That's such a powerful image. The covering and veil likely represent the barriers that separate us from God and from each other. Things like pride, fear, prejudice, even our own limited understanding.
So it's not just about physical barriers. It's about those internal obstacles that keep us from experiencing true connection and unity.
Absolutely. And that destruction of the covering and the veil points to a future where those barriers are removed, where there's true reconciliation and understanding.
Inspiring vision.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder how we even begin to make that a reality in our own lives.
That's a great question. I think it starts with recognizing those coverings and veils in our own lives, those things that prevent us from seeing God clearly and from loving others fully.
So it's about being willing to examine our own hearts and to let go of anything that hinders us from experiencing God's love and grace.
Right. And it's also about being willing to step outside of our comfort zones and to engage with people who are different from us.
It's about building bridges instead of walls, about being peacemakers in a world that often feels so divided.
Absolutely. And that connects beautifully with the themes of peace and security that we explored in Isaiah 26. Remember the strong city metaphor?
Yes, it really made me think about what truly gives us a sense of security. It's easy to look to external things, our job, our possessions, our social status. But Isaiah seems to be saying that those things are ultimately fleeting.
The only true foundation for lasting peace and security is a deep and abiding trust in God. It's about surrendering to his will and letting go of our need to control everything.
It's a challenging message,
Yeah,
especially in a world that tells us we need to be self-sufficient and in control.
it definitely goes against the grain, yeah. But it also speaks to a deep longing within us, a longing for something more than the fleeting pleasures and temporary security that the world offers.
That makes me think about all the anxiety and fear that we carry around. Isaiah seems to be offering a different path, a path that leads to true peace and contentment.
Exactly. And that path is one of humility and surrender. It's about recognizing that we're not ultimately in control and that we don't have to be.
There's freedom in that surrender, isn't there? Freedom from the burden of trying to carry everything ourselves.
Absolutely. It's a freedom that comes from knowing that we're held and loved by a God who is bigger than any challenge we face.
That brings us back to the imagery of Isaiah 27, with God depicted as a gardener carefully tending his vineyard.
Right. That image is so comforting. It's a reminder that we're not alone in our struggles. God is actively involved in our lives, nurturing our growth and protecting us from harm.
It's like he's constantly pruning and shaping us,
Yeah.
helping us to become more fruitful.
And remember that verse about Jacob taking root and filling the world with fruit. That speaks to the transformative power of God's grace.
Right. It's not just about our own personal growth. It's about becoming channels of God's love and grace to the world around us.
Exactly, and that connects back to the image of the banquet for all nations. As we bear fruit in our lives, we contribute to the building of God's kingdom, a kingdom where all are welcome and where His love flows freely to everyone.
So it's not just about passively waiting for God to do everything. It's about uh, actively participating in His work of restoration and reconciliation.
Precisely. We're called to be agents of His love and grace in the world, to be peacemakers, to be bridge builders.
That's a powerful challenge. And it makes me think of that amazing image in Isaiah 27 of the great trumpet call that gathers the scattered Israelites back to Jerusalem.
Yes, it's a beautiful picture of God's initiative to reunite His people and bring them back to their rightful place.
And that restoration isn't just about a physical return to a geographical location. It's about spiritual renewal, about coming together as God's people and living in unity and harmony with one another.
It's a reminder that we're not meant to go through this life alone. We need each other. We need the support and encouragement of a community of faith.
And we need to be willing to extend that same love and support to others, to those who may be far from God or struggling in their faith.
Absolutely. We're all part of God's family, and He desires for us to live in unity and love.
That makes me think about all the divisions and conflicts we see in the world today, not just between nations, but also within families, communities, and even churches. How can we possibly be agents of reconciliation in a world that seems so fractured and broken?
It's a daunting task, for sure. But I think it starts with cultivating those qualities that Isaiah emphasizes throughout these chapters.
Qualities like trust, humility, a willingness to forgive, and a commitment to seeking peace and understanding.
Exactly. It's about putting aside our own selfish desires and seeking the well-being of others. It's about being willing to listen to those who hold different viewpoints and engage in respectful dialogue, even when it's difficult.
It's about recognizing that our unity is found in Christ, not in our agreement on every issue.
Right. And it's about remembering that God is ultimately the one who brings true reconciliation and healing. We can't do it on our own. We need His grace and guidance every step of the way.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, where does that leave us?
I think it leaves us with a sense of both challenge and encouragement. We're challenged to be agents of God's love and grace in a broken world, to be peacemakers, to be bridge builders.
But we're also encouraged by the reminder that we're not alone in this task.
God is with us, working through us, empowering us to make a difference. And we have His promise that He will ultimately bring about His kingdom of peace and righteousness.
So as you reflect on what we've explored today, think about those coverings and veils in your own life. What might need to be removed so you can experience more of God's love and grace? And how can you be an instrument of reconciliation and healing in your own sphere of influence?
We'll pick up on those questions next time as we wrap up our deep dive into Isaiah 25-27. Until then, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep trusting in the God who makes all things new.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Isaiah chapters 25 through 27. We've journeyed through some vivid imagery, explored some challenging themes, and wrestled with some big questions, really.
It's been quite a journey. And as we wrap things up, I think it's important to step back and consider the overall message of these chapters, right? What's the key takeaway Isaiah wants us to grasp?
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the details, but you're right. The big picture is essential. So, what do you see as the central theme or the most significant insight from these chapters?
For me, it all boils down to the character of God, really. These chapters paint a portrait of a God who is both just and merciful, a God who confronts sin, but also offers redemption and restoration.
Yeah, that tension between justice and mercy has been a recurring theme throughout our deep dive. And it's something I think a lot of people struggle with, right? How can a God who is all-loving also be a God who brings judgment?
It's a profound paradox, tough to fully comprehend on this side of eternity.
Yeah.
But I think it's crucial to remember that God's justice isn't about punishment for its own sake. It's about restoring balance and order to a world that has been fractured by sin.
So God's judgment is ultimately an act of love aimed at healing and restoring creation.
Precisely. And that's why repentance and forgiveness are such central themes in these chapters. God takes no pleasure in punishing the wicked. He longs for them to turn away from their destructive paths and embrace his offer of reconciliation.
It's like that image of the banquet for all nations. It's a picture of God's uh, limitless love and grace extended to everyone who will receive it.
Exactly. And that banquet isn't just about physical sustenance. It represents spiritual nourishment, experiencing the fullness of God's presence and the joy of fellowship with him and with each other.
That makes me think about what it truly means to feast at God's table. It's not just about showing up for religious rituals. It's about a complete surrender of our hearts to God, allowing his love to transform us from the inside out.
It's about allowing ourselves to be nourished by his word and guided by his spirit. It's about seeking his will for our lives and living in obedience to his commands.
It's a lifelong journey of becoming more like Christ.
Absolutely. And it's a journey we're invited to take together. Remember that image of the great trumpet call gathering the scattered Israelites back to Jerusalem?
Yeah, it's such a powerful picture of God's initiative to reunite his people and restore them to their rightful place.
And that restoration isn't just about a physical return to a geographical location. It's about spiritual renewal, about coming together as God's people and living in unity and harmony with one another.
Right. It's a reminder that we're not meant to go through this life alone. We need each other. We need the support and encouragement of a community of faith.
And we're called to extend that same love and support to others, even to those who may seem far from God or who are struggling in their faith.
That image of unity is inspiring, but it makes me think about all the divisions and conflicts we see in the world today, not just between nations, but within families, communities, and even churches. How can we possibly be agents of reconciliation and healing in a world that feels so fractured and broken?
It's a daunting task, no doubt, but I think it starts with each of us cultivating those qualities that Isaiah emphasizes throughout these chapters.
Yeah.
Trusting God, humility, a willingness to forgive, and a commitment to pursuing peace and understanding.
So it's about putting aside our own selfish desires and agendas and genuinely seeking the well-being of others. It's about being willing to listen to those who hold different viewpoints and engage in respectful dialogue, even when it's difficult.
It's about choosing to be peacemakers, about building bridges instead of walls.
And it's about remembering that ultimately God is the one who brings true reconciliation and healing. We can't do it on our own. We need his grace and guidance every step of the way.
That's where our hope lies. Even when surrounded by chaos and uncertainty, we can rest assured that God is at work weaving together his tapestry of redemption.
It's a beautiful, inspiring thought, really. Leaves us with both a challenge and a deep sense of encouragement as we try to live out these truths.
So, as we conclude our deep dive into Isaiah chapters 25 through 27, we leave you with this final thought. May these words from the prophet inspire you to live a life of trust, humility, and peace. May you be an agent of reconciliation in a broken world. And may you always remember that God's love and grace are sufficient for all who call upon his name.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey through Isaiah. We hope you've gained some valuable insights, and we pray these words will continue to resonate in your heart and mind long after you finish listening. Keep digging, keep exploring, and keep seeking truth. Until next time.